So for those that don't know, a lot of these like product lab episodes are really just about Chris and I being able to get all the good, fun, ridiculous stuff and really trying to be able to show folks like, hey, what's cooking, right? And so Chris, don't judge me, but I might have set up our slides to look a whole lot like Breaking Bad. So here we go. I'm going to go and jump straight into a little bit of the fun, Chris, because when I go to screen share, I decided we let it cook, right? The lab was labbing, let her cook, and keeping it going today, Chris, it's a pretty big batch. So if you're not
Yeah.
aware and folks haven't joined us before, the whole idea of Product Lab, it's well, one, a combo of shenanigans. It is a lot of live conversation. So those of you who are not using chat, like light it up. I'm curious. Where are you guys from? What are you doing? And if you are chatting, before I go into any sort of ridiculousness, please change your chat to everyone. It's one of the simple things that you can do that part of what makes all this ridiculous is the fact that we're not here to present you
Right.
slides, right? We're might lead them, but the reality is we want to walk you through what's going on behind the scenes. For those that don't know, I think there's like over 160 or so, almost 200 different flavors of engineer, from product to database to scaling folks to the actual SOC side of the house as well, that supports. It is a massive team. It's larger than like a lot of people's businesses. But the part that I wanted to share here is most of the top of the funnel, right? What they build comes from these product lab episodes, comes from us on the road at trade shows, and comes from like ridiculous ideas just in casual environments. So I see, Chris, we've got all kinds of, we got some New
Yeah.
Zealand going on. We got some Belgium, Canada, plenty of US, Dayton, Ohio
Montreal
representing.
getting some snow,
Oh gosh. Yeah,
which
I bet.
maybe like last week I was good with, but here yesterday we hit 60 degrees. So I was like, dude, springtime, baby. We're
I am
beyond that.
I am 22 Celsius, 73, 74 Fahrenheit.
Nice.
So I'm not
Okay.
going back. The snow's done for me. I don't want to see
Yep.
it or hear it.
It's
And
over.
it looks like other people are feeling the same way. Spring peeking around the corner for sure. So Chris, if you're okay, typically if you've joined us on Product Lab before, we usually start with what's coming fresh out of the lab. But in a big but, I wasn't joking when I let off with it's a large batch, because when I started facilitating and kind of asking all the different questions from internally the team of like, what do we want to show? They were like, we have shipped so much stuff in the beginning of the year. Do you want to just do an episode where not only can we get feedback, tease what's going on, maybe hint a little bit on innovation, but show what's going? So, yeah, I'm getting ready to go kick some of this fun stuff off real quick. And with that said, we're diving back in. So today's agenda: SIM, EDR, ITDR, SAT, and a big sexy call to action. If you've never followed along with us before, we try to merge some of these because some of these products work really, really good together. And we're in the world where if we had more time, we would actually have a whole section on our platform, how the platform innovations that we're doing now that we have so many products. And we kind of want to get some of your ideas on how these products should be interacting better. It's kind of building the scaffolding in 25 that allows products to do anything with each other. But just because they can do anything doesn't mean you shouldn't start with the good. So, Chris, I was going to tee you up maybe and have you, since you're still
Yeah.
PMing the SIM innovation, you just did Write a Boom. You had 175 people join you for that SIM SOC training.
hmm
Do you
hmm
mind walking people through what you've been doing? And then maybe we'll give people access to the demo environment if you're cool with that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, a lot of goodness on Sim. Talked to a lot of people at product, or I mean, at Write a Boom. And a lot of the questions were, hey, Sim is awesome. How do I try it out? What's new? How can I keep up with all this stuff? Can I put this data in there? Can I put that data in there? So really good conversations. Loved it. So let's talk about some of those new things.
All right. Got you teed up.
Yeah. So as always, new data sources, right? You got to bring more data in, but the right data, right? And that was a thing that I talked about a lot at Rate of Boom is it's not about just like get all the data from everywhere and that'll cost you a lot of money. Like let's get the right data, the data that means stuff. So we've been focused on a couple of areas here, and you can see it's like firewalls. New one that we added was Barracuda. We've been pulling in the authenticity or the authentication and identity. I like that word, authenticity. We should make that a thing. Um, stuff. So we added one password, we added Bitwarden, obviously more endpoint stuff. So app locker, app control, Windows DNS. So if there are any folks out there, I saw there were a couple in chat, Australia, New Zealand. These are requirements for your Essential 8 as far as app control and app locker. So added those in. Coming soon. This is the where it gets real interesting. Sentinel-1 activity logs and Meraki Cloud. So we want to be pretty clear on this. We are not going to manage Sentinel-1, right? We're not going to like suddenly be in there and looking at all the stuff and deciding what's right and doing remediations. That's other companies do that. What we will do is we'll take in the Sentinel-1 activity that will tell us things about like when new endpoints are added or removed and when they see threats and Sentinel-1 thinks that there's something that could be malicious. We will use that as another telemetry source to put in front of our SOC, just like we do with Defender alerts for managed AV, and then we will look at them.
Chris, I read the feedback on about 60, both requests on feedback.huntress.com, right? The place where you can give all the feedback. The number one thing folks said is, look, I don't need you to manage the full health of my Sentinel-1, but I'll be darned if I don't need help figuring out what these alerts mean, right? Help me with the antivirus alert side. So we're playing with it. When we say we're playing, we mean like the SIEM is going to ingest it, but we're actually looking to put the human managed component around it, very similar to what we do on managed antivirus, but it won't be all the health of the Sentinel-1 agent. It won't be keeping the Sentinel-1 agent up to date. It really is from a log source, helping triage and take action on some of these alerts while also not bothering with some of the kind of weak sauce alerts that you get in there. So yeah, I appreciate Chris, you clarifying that, because it's very different than saying I'm going to manage everybody's antivirus. And for those of you who are curious where this came from, it came from you. 60 plus pieces of feedback and sales calls, the actual, canny where we get all the feedback from, as well as just the kind of roadshow, doing roadshows, listen to what people want. So yeah. Also responding on Sentinel-1. To be honest, we're playing with where we're going to go. It's definitely going to have incident reports. And if the incident reports, for instance, can be able to like actually take action, just like we do on the other side of it, we do plan to. I don't think, Chris, we're looking at exploring right now any of the dismissing within the Sentinel-1 console or anything, right?
Nope.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, yeah, no. So we're not going in there. We don't have API keys. We don't have credentials for Sentinel-1. We're not going to go in and manage it or do any kind of dismissals or whatever in Sentinel-1. We're just getting notification that, hey, Sentinel-1 thinks this thing is bad, or Sentinel-1 quarantine this file, or whatever happens to be like that.
So that's a hardcore yes. Of course, we're responding. Yes, we're going to take action. Yes, you'll be able to get that same support. No, we're also not going to log into the portal at this time. It's early. So when we say coming soon, you can imagine if you've been following us at like Product Lab, we're all about crawl, walk, run and figure out what people want. And sometimes what folks want is a lot like the faster horse. And it's not quite realizing like, oh, I actually need a car. And so that's the reason that we iterate so small the way we do. So darn good question. Chris, you got another one from Tanner who just asked, yo, so what's this Meraki cloud thing? Is this different than the current Meraki integration? Tell me about it.
Yeah, so we found we've got a bunch of partners already who send us syslog data through Meraki, right? We collect that. But we found that there's a lot of partners who've got deployments where they've got a Meraki firewall, they've got a bunch of laptops, but no like server infrastructure or anywhere that really made sense to run a persistent Huntress agent. And they said, hey, we pay for Meraki Cloud. Our logs are in the cloud. Can you go get them from the cloud? So that is what we were working on. How can we go and fetch those logs from the cloud so you don't have to try to figure out how you send unencrypted syslog over the internet to us, or how to like run an extra laptop that like is always on. We'll just get them from the cloud if that's an option. So that's
I feel
what
like
we're
there's
working
like
on.
a South Park reference there of like unencrypted syslog is bad. Okay. It's that's not the best idea. So you can
Yeah, don't
imagine
do
we're
that.
trying to figure out how to help you do this and not get wrecked in the process. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, a lot to explore there. Curious. We were just talking with a vendor this morning that's in the the backup space. And the vendor was talking to us about their appliance. We're trying to figure out like when you have, for instance, a server that needs to go straight to the cloud. Obviously, in this case of Meraki, we're trying to go straight to the cloud. But I'm curious, how do you all handle it when you don't have, for instance, maybe this like dedicated redirector or a server or an agent to be able to pull stuff to? How are you doing that with your firewalls? Like, I'm super curious.
Yeah.
While we give folks a chance, Chris, to be able to maybe like chime in and chat, do you want to talk a little bit about the wildness that you're kind of going through with PowerShell? I know you did quite a bit of this PowerShell log collection in your Right of
Yep.
Boom, security
Yep.
training.
Yeah, PowerShell is an interesting one. So, and we'll actually kind of show off some of the stuff, and you can jump into the slides. One of the things I talked about at Right Boom was just how much data is there in PowerShell. So there's kind of three logs, three log types that they have. They have module loading, which will basically generate an event every time a module or a library effectively is loaded into PowerShell, which gives you good insight into kind of what people are doing. And then there's also script block logging, which will give you literally the PowerShell script, like a script block to say like, hey, here's all the PowerShell that's going to run, and you can, run detectors and stuff against that. And then the last type is transaction logs, which is basically like every single command that's run. It's very, very detailed and very verbose. And so we've started collecting these for a number of people who needed it for Australian Essential 8 compliance.
Mm-hmm.
And we're looking to turn it on everywhere, but we got to make sure that smart filtering is done right. Because like I said, it can be a ton of stuff, and a lot of it actually is totally benign stuff that's coming either from things that the operating system is doing or like RMMs are doing, and it's getting a little crazy there. So we need to make sure that we're finding the right stuff and not just collecting way too much data.
So Drew asked the question, yo, do we got an ETA on something like a cloud collector? I'm curious, Drew, which cloud? Obviously, I know it's loaded. I'm assuming it's probably like Azure related with a lot of the audience that we have. Is it Google Compute? Is it AWS? What are you thinking? Obviously, we use a lot of these products and we tend to build for ourselves just the same way that we build for our partners. Would love to know. The number one, Chris, while we hear from Drew in chat, I've heard a lot of stuff about, hey, can you guys bring in more Azure logs? I know one thing you're looking at
Yep.
doing right now, Chris, and maybe you've done it. I don't recall. When we're doing on ITDR, say when somebody's using SIEM and they're using ITDR, have we started populating the SIEM with the ITDR logs we collect as well?
Yep, those are in there now. For everybody who is a paying customer for ITDR, you can find all of those logs in your SIM. You can search the last 30 days. We'll keep them for a year. All that kind of stuff is in there, which is really great for anybody who's like wants to look at stuff that's interesting, but maybe not a security thing, or just wants to double check some stuff. Previously, you had to go to like Microsoft Purview and try to like get the logs, and it was very painful. Our SIM should be super easy for you to get and see those.
Nice. No, that's darn good to hear. So we've actually had a couple other ones, Chris. So I'm going to take you in a couple directions, but I'm going to circle back there. SIM retention, right? So not just where we're, have hot storage, searchable, indexable, etc., but talking about the long-term retentions a year. But folks said,
Yeah.
hey, HIPAA and different things. I think PCI has some longer requirements too. So folks are talking about 7 years. Is this feature on the table? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, it totally is. So we've actually been working on this recently. There's kind of two parts to this. One is like long-term storage and cold storage. How can we keep it for longer for folks that need it for 3, 5, 7, 10 years, whatever it happens to be? That exists like the from the technology standpoint. We can do that today. Where we're still trying to connect this is to the billing side. Like, how do we quote you for that? How do we generate you an invoice for that? Does that have to be everything in your account stays for 10 years? Can it be granular? Can it be like done by organization or by like individual data source? What are the requirements there for like the UI and all that kind of stuff. So there's still a lot of questions to be worked out there, but from a technology standpoint, we can keep it for however long we want. The second piece there is the hot storage. There are some requirements like PCI that need it for 90 days hot storage. We have finished the technology piece of that. Again, we can keep it there for an arbitrary amount of time. We could keep it there for 180 days if you had to have it. The question then becomes, how do we bill for that? And how do you decide where you want that to happen? And is it everywhere? Is it one place? That's the part that we're trying to work through now.
So Neil, I know you specifically asked that question, and there might be others kind of feeling the same darn thing. If you are having those log retention, questions, hit up your account manager ASAP. Like this is like we're a 500-person company. The moment that we as founders lose the ability to go talk to you all, like we've lost our way. We'll reach out, we'll connect. And since Chris is actually building, right? He's the PM for the SIM team, and the SIM team's just about to go from the innovation lab into the product area. What I mean by that is innovation is how do we go from like 0 to the first 20%? How do you get the remaining, 20 to 80? Right? There's a lot of nuances, small little things like this that make a big difference. So if you aren't like, I'm going to say it, abusing your account managers, do it. We are like joined at the hip from account managers to the product team. It's a product led business. So let's get more of that. So if you can't tell, that answer is a yes. We sure as hell are committed to being able to store, whether you needed something like more hot storage or more of the long-term cold storage to be able to handle
Yep.
whatever the flavor is. And we're building the tech to be able to do it. So dope question, Neil.
Yeah. And it looks like Drew was actually asking about like being able to send syslogs, uh, I didn't like encrypted syslogs over TCP, I'm assuming, to some sort of cloud collector so that we would pull them up. That should be coming pretty soon. That uses a lot of the same infrastructure that we just set up to do Sentinel-1 logs. It'll use a lot of the same infrastructure under the hood. So once we get that done, then we should be able to just flip on another one and receive TCP syslogs. There's still that question of like, what do you do if you have a thing and you need to log it somewhere and it will only send
Yep.
UDP unencrypted? What do you do? Like, do you
You
do
get a
it? Do
new
you not
vendor.
do
No,
it?
I'm
I
so
don't
salty
know.
about this thing. I know, like back in the day of you only send your logs locally. I get the idea, and you're exactly right. Technically, you should put a new, a log collector on prem. But man, it is 2025. Like, get the fuck going. Okay,
I
I'll
mean,
quit being
like you'd be
salty.
surprised. Pretty much every firewall, like appliance vendor under the sun, they'll do syslog, but it's only UDP. It's only unencrypted. It's crazy.
Okay, no, quit being salty. But this is why I love some of these questions. Really, really good questions, Drew Neil. Ramon asking the question, saying, "Yo, I'm seeing Sentinel-1. Do you guys have plans to add CrowdStrike?" And I'm sure other people are like, "What
Mm,
about me, Sophos? What about this, that, and the other?" How do you want to handle that one, Chris? It's a good one. You and I have role played this
yep.
a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think we'll do it, right? It's one of those where, and we went back and forth about this. And actually, somebody asked me about this yesterday. One of the folks internally and said, "Hey, we'd always said, hey, we're going to bring in our own data and we're going to do our own stuff. Why the change in thought around, SIM and bringing in Sentinel-1 data and potentially other vendor data?" And really, it came down to like, hey, how do we have a platform that brings in data from many places, that gives us better telemetry? But how do we set the expectation such that people don't think they buy CrowdStrike or Sentinel-1 or some other vendor, then they buy Huntress, and now we're managing that product, right? There's a separation. We're just getting some of the activity data, we're getting alerts from it. We will look at those. We will then try to correlate with our own telemetry to see if we also see maybe the same suspicious, malicious processes, whatever. We just want to make sure that's there. So,
Yeah, this is that blend, right, Chris, of where does SIM and end and EDR begin? And Kevin asked this
yep.
good question. I'm gonna bring back some of the the supporting material because you actually jump into some of these both PowerShell logs and the brute force logs. So I think it makes sense to have this up. If we go take a peek, right? Kevin asked the question of like, yo, for this PowerShell log collection, are you kind of just auditing it? Are you like hunting
Mm,
through it? Is Huntress going to actively interfere and block PowerShell unless the exclusions are defined? Like, what is it? And I think, Chris, some of this stuff is starting with let's get the data collected.
yeah.
And then you can imagine where does SIM end and EDR begin? And I think literally the first slide of EDR talks about how we're learning these 1+1 are truly way more than 3, right? EDR is dope. It
Yep.
is really, really, really good. But we are finding some cases of like even just like having the time it takes to be able to wreck a threat actor, especially post exploitation. So do you want to talk about that for that
Yep.
question of just like what is the
Yeah.
PowerShell, and then maybe you can show me a little bit of the brute force stuff.
Yep. So today PowerShell is a collect and detect capability. So we will collect the PowerShell logs. We've got detectors written for it to try and identify malicious activity within those logs that we've been doing things on in our lab environment, right? Running things like Atomic Red Team and other malicious attacks. So we can see that, we can detect some of those things, but we are not going to prevent it. We are not doing the any kind of stopping PowerShell yet, at least not with the SIM. We're going to look into that and figure out how we do that with EDR type things. And like Kyle said, where's the line there? Like where does one end and the other begin? And there will be some overlap. And this is something that we've talked about internally of like, hey, if we have a EDR detector for this, should we also have a SIM detector? Yeah, why not? Right? Like if somebody only has SIM or they only have EDR, if we can detect it, we should. Like we've already got all the capabilities internally to take two different signals and say, hey, these are the same malicious activity, put them together. So, that's fine to have multiple signals for the same thing.
So still got some good ones in here, Chris. I'm going to let you run through brute force, and then I'm going to tee up a couple more as we get ready to pivot from SIM to EDR. So obviously you've been doing a
Yep.
lot with brute force. We have detectors. We're creating incidents. Do you want to walk through the team? I mean, obviously this is a super
Yeah.
quick view, but this is a useful bit of
Yeah.
intel that we're getting ready to both not only rolling out in detectors, but exposing more in the UI.
Yeah, so this is a snapshot. This is a behind the scenes. This is what our SOC sees. And what we're looking for here are Windows machines that are basically reporting a lot of failed logins from RDP from public IP addresses. So this is not like internally one machine trying to talk to another machine where like maybe the printer needs the password updated or something. This is public IP addresses that are failing to authenticate over RDP. So these machines are exposed to the internet. And basically, what we're doing is bucketing them in 10-minute intervals, as you can see here. And we are looking for anything where the number of failed authentications is over some threshold. And we can slice this data in many different ways. We can slice it and say, is there a lot of failures from one particular IP? Are there a lot of failures for one specific user, like administrator? Are there a lot of failures, but they're wide, and we're seeing it against a lot of different users, which would be a password spray attack, right? There's some nuances there, but we've got the data. We've now got it set up so that we can see these things in multiple different ways, and we've been sending many incidents based on these brute force attacks and recommending that people go and investigate why these machines are on the internet, update their firewalls, ensure they have two-factor, and ideally put these behind like a VPN or something so that they are not exposed publicly.
So keeping that going, Chris, I know this next one gets into the sim hunting environment. Obviously, I think I counted 175 people joined you at Ride a Boom in like four
Yep, yep,
sessions. One of the things you came up with, and even though it's only meant for Ride a Boom, I gathered a couple of your resources in case anybody hasn't played with this before. Like you can take a look as like it's huntress.io/ write a boom 2025 ROB 2025. And what's neat about this is you guys can go tinker. It's kind of a read-only environment that a lot of what Chris is doing. And so this is a little bit different. It's not like the same as a trial that you're gonna, immediately have to populate your own data. It's a read-only environment for learning. We'll take this sucker down. So this self-admit this recording here is going to age, that one day someone's going to go try to get to it and this environment won't be available. But if you're into training and you're into learning, I'm going to place the full URL to like where to get the PDF from the training here, and want to mention that you can go out there and get actual access to this environment today. And
yeah.
Chris, I imagine it'll be up for what, probably a couple weeks.
Yeah, I figured we'd keep this up for a couple of weeks, let people access it. We're eventually going to transition this over into probably being available all the time. So what we found through a bunch of conversations and trials and stuff is that a lot of times people want to come in and they want to see a Huntress environment with a bunch of organizations and machines in it and data. They want to see SIM data that they can play around with, or EDR data, or see what it's like when it's connected to ITDR and Microsoft 365. But setting that up can be, it's time consuming. It requires time. Not everybody has the permission to do that. Not everybody wants to connect it to their production environment without first kind of seeing it. So sometimes we ended up in this, kind of catch 22 where we were telling people, hey, go sign up and you can put your stuff in there. And they were saying, well, we're not really ready for that. So we needed some way to kind of give that middle ground, that stepping stone. So we already had this demo environment that we use in our sales demos. Our sales engineers use it all the time. We pump it in there with demo data, but realistic scenarios that we have seen from other places, data that we've sanitized, things that we've generated in our lab, all kinds of stuff like that. So we figured, well, why don't we just give people access to this? Like, make it easy for them to just drop their email address in. We'll send them a magic link and boom, they're in. They're read only. They can't do anything else. They can't create organizations or add agents or adjust passwords or anything like that. But at least they can play around and see what's in there.
Yeah, Chris. So in the chat, the live chat, I threw a link to that SOC skills SIM PDF. And in addition to it, if you go to slide 19, in case anybody forgets later, it has these same instructions on you. So if you grab the PDF, it pretty much has what you need. It's not as good as live instruction, but this
Yeah.
audience is pretty technical. I think you'll figure it out.
Yep.
Okay. Chris, I want to make sure I hit some of these same questions while they're up. First one, folks ask like, hey, any plans on creating a SASE product? I'll tell you, as a team that has, 500 plus of us that are fully remote, I think we're in like 44 states, 6 countries now, something along those lines. We don't have a perimeter, and we're kind of in this world where the perimeter is dead. I think a lot of us are still trying to figure out, is a virtual perimeter SASE type network a legacy holdover? Is it truly needed to have these networks in a virtual environment? Or is there actually a world where, we've all lived at coffee shops for the last several years, right? Even before COVID, we were very remote. And one of the things we're figuring out is all the other places hunters could put R&D. We're much more interested in like the hardening. So call that security posture management, doing a lot of, like backup related work that we want to be able to make it. So like when your EDR finds something, why can't I restore your files for you already, like automatically? So Chris, on my, roadmap, I'm not seeing SASE anywhere. Are you?
No, I'm not either. There's a lot of stuff that we can do. I don't know that that one's like super high value. I think there's other things that we can do that bring more value to people.
Okay, so keeping it going, then I know we're gonna have a lot. If I missed questions, by the way, like don't hesitate to light me up in QA.
Yeah.
There was one question we started asking about, like, hey, what about app control, app locker for SIM stuff? Any thoughts on app, the allow listing or deny listing? We're looking very, very specifically that part of our endpoint security posture management will probably have some deny listing functionality and allow listing functionality. I think it'll be much closer to a, hey, look, do you need to carry your own driver with you and do it like Threat Locker? Or why can't you, fully manage or have a much better management experience over top of stuff like Windows, WDAC, right? The Windows Defender implementation for Windows. And then obviously for the Mac environments, we have to roll a little bit of our own. So that's a very long way of saying not only are we thinking about it, I would be very I'm over 60% sure that a form of allow listing will eventually come to hunters. It's just, we think it's smart, an ounce of prevention is still worth a pound of cure. It's just not perfect.
Yep.
I'm going to keep rolling, Chris. Time is melting. When we said SIM 1 + 1 equals more than 3, it's not a cute thing. We've been gathering more telemetry on trying to even learn, stuff that vendors don't do a good job at is just being humble and normal. Sometimes we don't freaking know what we don't know. I don't know how else to say it. And it turns out we're learning a lot with this SIM of what happens when we have SIM and EDR partners. A lot of these are really good ideas. We know directionally that 1 + 1 was going to equal more than 2. Take a look at some of the timestamps, right? You're looking up here at some of these initial failed logon attempts happen roughly at 9/11. And then if you notice further down when EDR is catching some of it, some of the behaviors, you see it down here at 9:53. Still just reg dumping, right? Which is credentials and things usually that are being pulled out of there. So it's not quite to the level that maybe data exfil happened. Maybe lateral movement hasn't even happened. Notice it happened down here a couple minutes later. Excuse me. Did I get that right? Yeah, it looked like it was automated very fast. Credential dumping all the way to lateral movement. So this is definitely automated a couple seconds, 14 seconds later. But take a look at that massive difference, right? So we are seeing some of the places where EDR is dope. Prevention is still king, right? You need a next gen antivirus, but and but not having some of the telemetry can actually hurt you. And sometimes having it provides more than, again, one and one sometimes is providing a much more rich environment that tells you not only where it came from and how to respond, right? That allows our team to take care of that. It often gets to root cause analysis much better. So, yeah, so there's a lot of these things, for instance, that we're exploring. Chris, we got a question that came in. Hey, any chance we plan to alert when SIM logs stop being received? That's kind of something we're about to talk about on EDR when we talk about this like extreme version of fleet management or health management. You want to comment on that one?
Yeah, so we have built some stuff for this. We're testing it internally. We are trying to make sure that this does not become an alert cannon where we are just firing off stuff all the time just because maybe we hadn't seen a firewall in a little bit, right? Maybe there was a power outage or, somebody closed their laptop and went on vacation for a few days and we didn't get some logs from there. We don't want to send you alerts and say, oh, we're not getting any logs and then turn out to be, just crying wolf, right? So, trying to figure out where that right balance is, trying to identify when the system is up or down. Can we get other telemetry? Like maybe we haven't got any SIM logs from it, but we see the EDR agent calling back from the machine, and that would suggest that like something was up there. So we're trying to just make sure that before we push it out there, that it is not just a super noisy.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Right. I mean, that's I think that's what people pay us for at the end of the day. Like having, don't get me wrong. I've heard the opposite criticism, Chris, of like, I just need a heartbeat sometimes from you. Like,
Yeah.
is this thing on right? You're quiet. How do I know it's working? Which I mean, that's real. Like, I'm pretty sure that's why we put blinky lights on a NIC, right? Just to see like data's
Yeah.
transmitting. Oh, all right, it's on. But agree, going the opposite and flooding people with alerts is just garbage. So, um, I will keep it, just keeping this fun and remember moving into EDR. Had a pretty fun SOC in EDR win and wanted to share with you. Like some folks ask, like, what's going on with the products? They don't think about people as the product. And really, it's one of our biggest differentiators of like, we didn't just accidentally assemble the Avengers of cybersecurity at Huntress. It's people that want to be there. And it's always cool to get these moments when you're like, oh, it wasn't actually the technology that shipped things in product. We had some info stealers that when it matches on certain words or user data, etc. And we were, flattered enough to have Cyber Ryu here, right? Jay Mitten, if anybody's ever met him in Australia, that some of the malware won't even run when some of the Hunters folks are on there. So it's kind of a fun, silly, homage. Not something product coming, but I thought you all would find this funny that there is actual malware that won't run when either certain things are named certain ways or certain users exist. Not that it saves you, but it's kind of dope knowing who's behind the products that you all at the end of the day shell out a buck for. Keeping that moving, we had this question earlier. So stricter fleet health is something we're really taking serious at Huntress. And what I mean by this, we've always had strict fleet health. We always need to keep these things together. But there's a real environment problem of some environments are hostile. For instance, Mac has really gone above and beyond to make sure it is very hard to get into running essentially kernel extension, some of the stuff that allows us to get some of this enhanced telemetry. We are doing pretty much anything and everything we can, starting to annoy you in your UI, saying, hey, you might have some of our feature, but some key functionality is not on. We're really trying to make our wizards even more annoying. The reason I say this, if you're doing these manually, there's a lot that can go wrong. When you do these through like some sort of MDM or RMM, a lot of the stuff goes by the wayside and is just configured for you. But I wanted to share these because we sometimes forget that even though a lot of us in this call probably don't have a ton of Macs, usually the people that do have Macs aren't just the creatives doing like Adobe type stuff, but sometimes it's like the CEO. Everybody else gets a ThinkPad, right? And CEO gets a MacBook Pro. Just keep this in mind. Like these things are really important. And so when you see us annoying, it's just right now we do some of these themes from an engineering perspective. And one of our big themes is more strict fleet health. We need this because Huntress is growing fast enough. And part of our managed services, we can't half-ass it. I want to show you some good stuff on Windows too, where we've got really strict. Take a look at over here. We've kind of internally redefined some of the word unhealthy. I will tell you, this doesn't represent 200,000 agents that are offline. That would be preposterous. But you notice that when this was taken, it was a little while ago. I think it was, earlier in the month. We were right at the 3 million mark, right, of endpoints that we were protecting on that day. And we've started getting really specific, like, hey, this could be even better performance. And a lot of times, if you have used our product, you can see it's less than 1% CPU. But some things like we run sometimes in some of our partners and even some of our like folks that won't use like an MSP or MSSP are like a cruise ship line. And when you're out on satellite internet or on an oil rig platform, right in the Gulf or something along those lines, having any extra surveying, and we actually define this of excessive surveying, can actually be minor degradation to all of us on, for instance, a normal internet connection, you're fine. If you're in a coal mine in South Africa or a diamond mine in South Africa, you might have to really worry about survey. And so some of these things that we're doing, whether it's degraded components, you notice none of them are in there. Outdated, we ship endpoint updates all day, every day. So this is a pretty strict definition, but I wanted to make sure you all hear, like, this is some of the boring side, just like how you guys have to keep up with patches, that we're starting to take extremely, extremely serious on this end. It's just has to do with when companies grow, they usually go to crap when they don't put this infrastructure in place, right? They go from 3 million agents to 6 million agents, and then they stop kind of caring. The service goes to crap. And if you can't tell, this is just really, we're trying to invest now before we need it. So I appreciate you calling that out, Kevin, of just acknowledging it. We don't know why certain vendors don't like to show this off. Like, I like to see somebody's journey. I like to know what hurdles they're going through. That's the reason we keep Product Lab so casual. So just wanted to share. That's kind of some of the stuff that we're going through. And by the way, we started doing this, if you remember 2 Product Labs ago, we really dove into like what new tamper protections we did, right? Just continuing to harden down the agent, using the kernel component to protect user space components. And so the question said, should we be concerned about EDR evasion noise increasing? EDR evasion has always been there. There's getting a little bit easier in cybercrime to do it. But if you can't tell, like, this is some of that same fleet management of like, oh, if somebody just hasn't called in, and how do we have stuff like a Mayday service, for instance, when part of the EDR maybe goes down, how do we send the SOS, Mayday, Mayday, have something like this? I'm coming up with a scenario of maybe somebody's popped into your network or was already in your network when you installed. They're running like a malicious driver, and the driver itself they've exploited, and they're running in the kernel. And when you run in the kernel, you can do whatever pretty much you want to an operating system, regardless of the tamper protections. That type of stuff is getting extreme. But let's be real. This is what cybersecurity is all about, figuring out what you have to protect at the right level of cost. So that's my way of saying, I don't think you should worry about increasing noise. I think you should see more of Huntress trying to repair these on our own without bothering you. And then when we don't, we're going to escalate something to you. We're going to say, hey, inquiry, we need your help with this. We noticed this, and this changed. Maybe it's an update. Maybe it's something quirky. Maybe it's a threat actor, but you're going to hear from us is what I'm saying. Just the ultimate idea is ideally we take it first. That's why we put the word managed in front of all of our products. Let us manage it. Chris, did you have anything on this? I know like this is a huge part of engineering, but
it is. And this is something we've done for a while. We've always had a bit of this. But digging into this actually turned out to be quite hard, right? Like 3 million agents calling back all the time, sending back a bunch of data. It turns into a big, hard problem of where do you put all that data? How can you query it? How can you scan over it and do aggregations and stuff like that? So it was always a challenge for us and our infrastructure to be able to not spend a ton of money on the infrastructure, but to be able to do some of this. We've actually got a blog post coming out, hopefully here soon, where we talk about just how we did this. So we used ClickHouse internally, the same thing our SIEM is built on top of, allows us to feed in just vast amounts of data and do really cool aggregations and queries to find anomalies and all that kind of stuff. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But like there was also there was a Reddit post a couple weeks back, maybe a couple months back, where somebody brought this up, and if you're curious, I acknowledged a bunch of stuff in there, talked about it, talked about what we were doing, and so like this is more of the same of, hey, here's kind of the progress we've made on this type of issue.
All right, dude. I appreciate it. I'm just watching our time melt, and I know we've got a lot
Yep.
going on.
Yep.
Um, One of the questions we got on EDR side of the house, we've got a lot of things we're working on. We know some of you, right? Just like, I don't know, think about the person that's gone vegan, or the person that who has I don't know, maybe you're into CrossFit. They're usually the first person to tell you. If you are one of those folks that are into CMMC, I get it. Usually most folks are all or nothing. A lot of things have changed with the final revisions. And one of the big ones we're stoked to announce is we have the ability to restrict sensitive CUI file collection now. If you don't know, reach out to your account administrator. Notice even our SOC being able to go after certain file types cannot do these. And even though there are, all kinds of nuances to CMMC, this is one of the big things that we've done to be able to enable that. So I don't want to dive too deep if we don't have anybody here that's like, look, I want to hear more. But if you do want to like navigate like CMMC compliance and all that stuff, we've got a whole blog on how we can help you with that. So please, please, please take a look at that if that's important to you. This is a subtle thing, by the way. This is part of like constantly improving. The way that I describe it is if you think about a cat and mouse game, today it's cat and mouse. Tomorrow it becomes, I don't know, rodent and bobcat. And then it eventually gets to, I don't know, gazelle and I don't know, cheetah. That's my best example of saying the cat and mouse game gets a little crazy. We're trying not to play the back and forth all day, every day. And so one of the major things that's happening behind the scenes, it's actually a platform feature, but right now it's only related to EDR, is upgrading our ability to do correlations, right? So if you take a look on its own, if anybody's ever seen data across even a couple hundred computers, let alone a couple thousand, you have all kinds of pieces of software like your RMM, right? Doing its own thing. Maybe sometimes it's cleaning some of the shadow copies, saving space. Maybe there's sometimes that like some BCD edit type commands are being done. Maybe you're hardening boot configurations. There's all kinds of reasons, but we see these all the time. And oftentimes these low and medium things can be combined into very, very sensitive rules. And so as we were working more on ransomware, like for better or worse, ransomware happens. It happens against all players, all companies, etc. But the part we wanted to share is there is juice sometimes that you can squeeze, not in the obvious places, meaning not adding more telemetry, but doing more with what you already have. If anybody remembers any of our previous product labs, we talk a lot about this Pareto principle, right? That we use at Huntress. What 20% of data will yield 80% of the value? It's the same reason that we don't store raw network traffic like on the SIEM. Raw network traffic is valuable, but at the cost that it takes to secure versus the risk your company is facing, generally speaking, it's not a great business decision on that end. It also is going to be very expensive. If you have Formula One budgets, buy a Formula One race car. Huntress is much closer to a high-end, uncompromising Lamborghini, and they still are fast enough to outpace hackers. So keep that in mind. It's not nobody says, oh, I only have to drive a Lambo. The point that we're getting across is these little things that we're doing here are very specific on saying, how do we keep not only your cost predictable, minimize your alerts, but notice this case. This was all in the testing phase. And this was an actual scenario. Notice over here, made it to ransomware. And more along this lines of being able to say, when we're finding these medium things, if we didn't have this correlation rule to be able to do it, this is what the timeline would have played out. So it's a little bit of taking historics and saying a what if this was run and this correlation was here and we had isolated at this time. you can see valuable time, right? Happening at the 8:31 mark. And then actual things, going down. You can see actually at 9:30, about an hour difference here. These correlations really, really matter. So I know you'll never see this externally. I just wanted to share with folks this type of daily innovation. If you don't do it, you just get wrecked. So I hope that's like music to your ears. There's no extra cost for this type of stuff. And the same correlations is going to allow cross product correlations as well. So even though I only gave you an EDR example, so really fun stuff going on in the lab. Chris, we got so many different things. Someone asked, any thoughts on adding RMM, like remote access tool detections and reporting to EDR? This was actually Melina, sorry if I butchered that, was asking that. They said, it's the simple question of like, hey, kind of like how ITDR does with the VPNs. Could you allow me to pick and choose what RMMs I'm expecting and then warn me on? I think it's a phenomenal idea. I know it is on our
Yeah.
roadmap, like as in it's in our, we call it like the ice box. It is definitely something that's important. Chris, do you recall if that is on the actual EDR roadmap itself? I'm pulling it up as we speak. So if you don't
It's a
know,
good question. We've talked about it for a while. I think we've internally called it app auditing. Whether
yep.
or not that will survive through like marketing and all that stuff, we'll see. But the idea was to identify applications that are installed on the machine more than just looking at the, Microsoft Windows list of installed applications, but really truly to identify the stuff that's on there and then match that to some sort of standard or baseline or whatever, and allow you to then identify cases where you've got multiple different RMMs installed, multiple maybe Screen Connect calling back to two different places and all that kind of stuff. For a lot of people, that would be like immediate, hey, big red flags of like, two different Screen Connects. For some people, it's less so because they, maybe they have their MSP that was bought by a roll up and now there's two Screen Connects for this reason or something. So there's all those kind of things where you'd also want to be able to go in and say, this is allowed here, this is not allowed there, all those kind of things.
So
So
Chris, I'm a
that's
big
how
fan of
we've been
this.
thinking about it.
I just pulled over the Q1 and Q2, the like overview. So there's could be nuances inside this, but I'm not seeing it in Q1 and Q2. Just showing how this works, by the way. I think this is a wonderful, like we've discussed this app auditing idea for years. I might push for a Q3 type capability in here. I think that's a brilliant idea. The lift on this is not too hard. And even if we just started with basic things, like we didn't just start with all VPNs on ITDR, we slowly grew telemetry, etc. I would love some ability to, app audit. And really it comes down to, does it go in EDR, Chris? Or is this the beginning of like some of the, endpoint security posture management where maybe we give some of this stuff away for free for the beginning and then let people use it, test it, play with it, and eventually we'll have to make money on it. But I love it. I think that's a really good idea and really appreciate. If you thought, for instance, you can't change the roadmap at Huntress, I think we just saw a great example of where I'm going to push for this in Q3.
Yep.
Chris, keeping it going. These are, again, we're at 10 minutes remaining. So much, like they weren't joking when they told us, they let it cook and there was, the lab was labbing here. Many folks are starting to use SOC support. There's even a lot of like misinformation. If anybody's ever talked to our team, we're very anti, like, don't talk bad about a competitor, right? Just, not just take the high road, but just beat them in competition. A lot of people forget that we not only have SOC support that you can just chat with, but we actually have phone ability. And so what I was excited about is some of this got released on an early episode of Product Lab. Chris, I just pulled some stats real quick. Look like, about 300. Most people are using the, hey, chat, just dropping down in the
Yeah.
UI in the bottom
Right.
left-hand corner and saying, hey, I want to talk to SOC support to be able to get an answer. But
Yep.
we're actually seeing, a decent amount, like 60 or so folks saying, hey, I could just use a phone call. Let's talk, feeling bad along those lines. So if you're not using this, like, please use it. It's available to you. It's part of your costs. There is no it's not a services agreement where like if you want to be able to call and talk to people, you pay more. Like
Yeah.
it's part of your license. So if you don't know what SOC support is, I just dropped a link on the Huntress Hub that has a couple-minute video from Tyler here. Tyler actually runs the SOC Support Fusion Center, which is it's a fusion center from SOC analysts and product support. They sit literally in between. So please use and abuse, that link and learn a little bit more, because there's probably a lot of stuff you didn't even know exists. Chris, you want to talk about rogue apps? Like, this is something that's becoming
Yeah.
like fairly nasty out there, and I think we got to fly through it because we got a little bit more to cover. But this is kind of important here.
Yeah, we've talked about this a bit before on some of our previous product labs. We talked about it being in beta. It is finally released. It's out there for everybody who has ITDR. And basically, what we're doing is we're reviewing and investigating all the applications that have been added into Entra tenants. So you can add applications to do all kinds of different things, and extend the capabilities of what is involved in Entra. As we started to look into them, we found nearly 500 of them in just the tenants that we have access into that are using a very similar attack technique to one that was popularized by APT29, which is Midnight Blizzard, has many other names from different vendors, but we're not saying it is APT29. We're saying it's the same technique that APT29 used. And so this was bad. We expected to find badness. We did not expect to find that much badness that fast and that widespread. So we sent a bunch of incident reports about this. We are still trying to clean all of this up. But we believe this is just the beginning of what we can detect with this type of a capability.
If you all aren't using ITDR and are on Microsoft 365, I want to give you a heads up. Matt, right? So this is Matt Kiley, our head of the product research for that product. Phenomenal, not only just instructor in person, but phenomenal security researcher. He wrote an open source app that if you like have friends that, for instance, don't want to come in and abuse our trial, or I don't know, there's something like it finds the most common rogue apps for you. I think it's loaded with like 5 or so that we're seeing. So take a peek at it. It's free. It's open source. It's on his GitHub. I included the link to Reddit, right? So whether you're on sysadmin Reddit or MSP Reddit, the tool works the same way. It'll handle multi-tenant and single tenant environments. So please use and abuse this. It's actually becoming we're kind of describing like the identity world is the new endpoint. And remember when everybody used to say like Macs don't get malware? We're seeing a little bit of folks that are like, my M365, my identity side doesn't get pwned. And it's like, no, it's actually like really, really gnarly. So please use that. Chris, I got a little bit more in here. You want to show a little bit of
Yeah.
the monitoring Entra apps, since we've got some
Yeah.
UI?
Yeah, so these are some of the screenshots of, like, you'll be able to see what are all the installed applications, how many organizations are they on. So for an MSP, that would be kind of how many end clients are they on. We give you kind of an idea of what do the permissions look like. Are they weak? Are they just able to see like users' names and emails, or are they powerful and they can change things and add stuff, right? So we give you some insight into there. We also, you can dive into them. So if you go to the next one, we'll actually show you kind of what are the permissions, give you some ideas of them, and actually from the dashboard, we'll allow you to just delete it. If you say, hey, this is bad, boom, delete application, and it's gone. And so that'll be awesome. I think people will take advantage of that. And then finally, we'll have a nice dashboard that kind of rolls a lot of that stuff up so that if you jump to the next slide, so that you
Yep.
can see things like open incidents associated with rogue applications, things that were installed recently, all that kind of good stuff. So that will be there. I think some of these pages are still in the works, so they may not be fully live today. They might be behind a feature flag or something, but this is what's coming.
So, Chris, we know that we've got this next one, audience participation, obviously figuring out what people are concerned about. While you're thinking about those, I want to give a quick update on Google Workspace. So, a lot of
Yep.
people have heard on our past product labs that we're considering, or they actually know that we're working on it. We are deep in R&D on Google Workspace. I will tell you, so far we've seen some promising things, like for instance, all the VPN type telemetry of, hey, is somebody coming in from a country, kind of like conditional access light. Hey, let's see where people are logging in. That appears to be actually fairly okay. And it seems like we're going to be able to give really good feature parity on that. We are deep in Works, and I will share if anybody happens to have connections at higher up in Google management. We as a team are seeing Google missing some log data, and specifically a whole category of new tradecraft that is just destroying businesses out there is token or session theft, right? That's stealing that cookie, loading it into a browser, and then abusing, kind of that browser to just get seamless login. Um, Even with all the things we have here at Huntress, we're a Google Workspace shop. We are seeing many cases where the logs are insufficient to allow any sort of what I would call hardcore identity detection and response on this specific, kind of cookie or identity based logs. And it's got us going internally. Okay, if we can't get the Google team to update this, do we move from Google? Right, we haven't made that conclusion yet, but we want to share with you. We are not just like winging this; we are deep in it, and what we've seen so far is actually giving us a little bit of pause of like, okay, hopefully we could use Google Workspace and continue using it for our, Google Drive, Google Docs, and for our email, which is what we predominantly use it for. But I wanted to share with you all, like, this is something that we'll probably share next month and actually show you what this looks under the hood so you can see a real look at the data. It'll be a fun, jump into the identity space if you all want it. And just wanted to let you know that that's the hard part sometimes about building these is when you work with a vendor, sometimes vendors don't know what they don't know. So fingers crossed, we'll be able to actually help not only up level the Huntress community, but help the entire global security community. And if we don't, yeah, we might actually have to move off of Workspace to full M365 instead of just partial M365. All right, that's some gravity. I'm reading just chat here, see what other fun stuff we've got. A lot of people saying if our customer business, Google Workspace accounts have SSO set up into 365, which obviously ITDR protects. Does this effectively mean suspicious, malicious login protection for the Google Workspace accounts? Chris, I actually don't know. Do you know? I've never done the integration that
Yeah,
way.
I haven't either. I haven't either. I mean, the fact that you'd have single sign-on with hopefully MFA on that Google sign-on, um,
It's
I
very similar to what we're
guess
using for
protects it a
Duo,
bit, but
using Duo for our IDP in some places that say, we might be able to still steal the cookie from Google Workspace,
yeah,
but when it, actually triggers, yeah, I think it's possible, Matt, but I appreciate you bringing it up. What we'll do is next month we'll actually bring some folks that can look into this. There's some interesting, as Ramon's going out here, right? Potential gaps, but even us who's using things like, it's not abnormal. What are we using, Chris, under the hood? Material that's helping
material
us find
security.
some of these odd sessions. Obviously, we have Wiz and other things in the back of the stack, like true enterprise tech, and we're still seeing our ability to fly through some of our own infrastructure. So, um, truly eating our own dog food on this one, but we'll keep you in the loop. I see folks keep, what things are, on their mind, trying to track network events and unify. Ugh, what a timely comment. If anybody hasn't seen all these darn things, it seemed like for a very long time, Ubiquity probably was a step above some of the other, edge devices, your Fortinets, your Sonic walls, etc. It seems like some of these security stacks are just rough all the way around the edge. So I agree for those of you saying, hey, your edge devices are a concern. It's kind of interesting. I'm seeing some folks like would be awesome to see app consent requests, something that says like, yo, flag these known malicious or risky apps before approval. So yeah, Tanner, we're playing, right? We're working super close with the Microsoft team to expose some of these things of like, is there a webhook when these come in? They can go into a state for approval. Sometimes, like I said, the difference between installing on a user level and the entire M365 tenant, there's some nuances here, but I appreciate you guys bringing these up. This actually helps me understand what you're thinking about in your security stack.
Yep. Yep. And I think Tanner also asked about API and wanting to be able to turn off tamper protection and automate agent uninstalls. And we both agree and are very concerned about that because if you can, take that API key and uninstall what if like an attacker got that API key and they just uninstalled all the stuff too? How do we handle that? How do we mitigate that? How do we detect against things like that? It's something that we've been trying to think through for a while, right? It's very much like we were talking to some folks about, backups. I'm like, hey, yeah, backups are great. What if the attackers can just delete your backups? Then what? Uh, right? It's like you kind of got to think through some of these things. So like there's always that trade-off, right? Everybody talks about the trade-off between security and usability. If you have no security, everything's super usable. If you got too much security, you can't really use anything. Kind of sucks. So you got to find that right trade-off or somewhere in the middle.
All right. I'm racing Chris through it because I did not realize this much content would take this long. SAT, things are flying. If you haven't seen in the Huntress Hub, all kinds of these ungated, meaning you don't got to fill out extra like things, you can get straight into some of these phishing demos. If you are not playing with these phishing simulations, like this isn't your yesteryear, grandma's weak templates, whatever, like these things kill it. And even in our own security organization, we are sometimes wrecking ourselves. It's just a really humbling experience of
Yeah.
how, problem exists between keyboard and chair. So if you are not playing with this stuff, do it. Again, hub.huntress.com. If anybody doesn't know, I'm going to throw the link right now. You are probably sleeping on the fact that the fake captchas that are going on right now, not only are they super popular, they essentially preload your keyboard and allow you to either use the Windows keys, or for instance, this one is a Windows version here. Windows key R to open the run prompt, Control V, and now all of a sudden info stealer is running on your stuff. It's happening a lot. What's cool is we've actually added your own ability to do these demos and to be able to send these type of landing pages into the SAT product. If you have not signed up already, like you would be crazy not to join the live demo and the phishing defense coaching, webinar. I
Yeah.
threw a link in there. It'll be a good one.
Definitely join that. I was surprised just by the sheer number of people who are getting caught by this, doing this, right? Like I knew, oh yeah, some people will get caught. They'll like control V, paste that thing in the run thing. We have reported this hundreds of times. I could not believe that. Like, is so many people are like, yeah, absolutely, I can paste this.
Yeah, that's a good example of EDR actually feeding into, now that we own our own product, right? We own the whole animation lab. A lot of these things are coming from, like, this was Truman and John Hammond who said, oh, we're seeing this in the wild. We've got these ideas. We're seeing people now get wrecked. Let's turn it into the other products. So it's really, really neat on that end. Open source intelligence. It's one of the things that I don't think people quite realize just how this works. If you all are sleeping on SAT, go in there and watch it. One of the first objections people actually laugh about is like, it's animated. People aren't going to like it. We've studied the data. The people freaking love it. Blue collar, even more. So if you have like thoughts on like, they might not, resonate, try this stuff out. Watch the episodes. They're really good. And again, the new OSINT episode is fire. And again, Chris, you have to go quick. Do you want to share this? This is in beta.
Yeah.
How do people get access to this?
So if you want access, well, let me first tell you what it is. So if you have like business premium licenses for Microsoft or E5 licenses, it comes with something called Defender Vulnerability Management, and they're basically collecting what are all the applications that are installed on the machine, what version are they? They've got a massive database of all of the different CVEs and what versions of which applications they apply to. And so Defender for Endpoint is constantly pulling back all that information. What we did is updated our integration to actually pull some of that stuff in and show it to you on a per tenant basis. So we can show you this host has this organization has these problems, all of that. So it is in there. If you want access to it, ping your account manager, ping support. We can get it turned on for you. But yeah, really some cool stuff that we were able to leverage what a lot of people already have, which is Defender for Business or E5.
Yeah, I will tell you, like, there is no world that I can see. Like, some folks hit us up when we teased about this last month, or sorry, 2 months ago. It was the December episode. No, this isn't like a ploy to get you going and then we'll hit you with like an extra cost. You're already paying for this stuff. It's in your business premium licensing most of the time. or if you have like E3, E5, obviously there's a lot of different SKUs over there. Our whole goal is to be able to help you use what you're already using, especially if it doesn't come at an extra cost. That's why you're buying a SaaS product, right? We not only
Yep.
have to keep up with the threats, it's part of what helps make us like a true partnership, right? So I'm glad to share that, yeah, this Defender vulnerability management, and you can probably see we're getting to this area where we're trying to figure out, is this EDR? Is this SPM? Either way, this is going to be free as long as you have it, but we're trying to figure out where do these things go, because
Yep.
EDR is very quickly starting to bleed into security posture management. So we are going through there. We've actually looked at a couple companies to acquire. We did due diligence on several of them and kind of said, it's ugly under the hood. So I will tell you, the SPM is coming, both on the endpoint and the identity side of it. We are really just being selective here, because built on top of I would be a liar to say if we hadn't made an acquisition offer to Enforcer already. They chose to take their Series A investment, so kudos to that team. But whether we build it initially or buy it and then revamp it, Huntress will be moving in that direction. Period.
And Matt asked if there was any automated remediation. So I was actually just on a call with Microsoft yesterday as part of our Microsoft partnership. We showed them some of this, and they said, "Hey, do you guys want to integrate with AutoPatch, which is their tooling for automatically patching applications?" And I said, "Yes, absolutely." So we're going to get an intro to the PMs over there. I'm curious to see what it is that they have, how that maps to the applications that we see, and whether they can be auto patched. How big is their catalog, all that kind of stuff.
So folks are asking, right? And I know this is getting in, we've got all kinds of little silly things in here. So those that asked for like different languages, we're starting to experiment, not with SAT episodes yet, but we actually just started our first episode, or sorry, our first of these like threat reports in different languages. And they're pretty okay. They're not perfect yet. They've got some room. Like notice we've got some little, some overlap here, some spacing here that we're working through. But what's nice is, yeah, we're putting it together, Marcos. So yeah, making these things happen. When you guys asked the question of like, hey, where do I send the gas to help? The number one problem companies at our stage run into is we're pretty good at marketing like the threat research type stuff, but threat research alone doesn't get people to actually try the products. Like the sales team will be able to convince. The number one thing we need from the community is just, again, if we've done something for you and actually earned it, just share it, right? That type of stuff actually goes so much further than like any ad spend I could do. And I also think it means like I don't have to ask you to do something perverse. If you have an experience that you want to do, like a case study for customer advocacy, or want to talk about just the way that we do product development differently, we're trying to get better at telling those stories. We used to do it pretty good when we were really small. Now that we're bigger, we've lost some of these skills. So again, that type of help is huge. And Chris, I think we took a look. We think that it's not a heavy lift, but a lighter lift to move to foreign language episodes for SAT than any of our other products, right? Is that what I heard from the analysis?
Yeah, I think so. So like for these reports and what the conversation was about for SAT is we actually just used AI to translate them. And the nice part about it was it's significantly better than like the Google Translate stuff. As I was feeding in some of these things, I'd feed in the sentence and I'd get the translation back out, and it also came with notes, and it would say, we changed around some of the sentence structure to better fit the way that the French language works or Spanish language works. We changed this word here. We identified that this was singular, so we made all of these singular. Like the AI was like pretty damn good at the translation. So we think we can use the same for like sad episodes.
And you can see obviously in the bottom, we still have some stuff where like English, this is actually a human that writes these. I think a lot of people don't realize that like we are truly writing these type of like what we're doing. We're English speaking team. A lot of our folks at the end of the day, have to depend on the language they're at, but we're experimenting while also not trying to come off like Google Translate. So anyways, exciting there. And the last but not least, the one place I want to just hit you with is your feedback matters. All of my product managers live at feedback.huntress.com. We do all kinds of fun stuff. If we don't get your feedback, we don't know what to build, and then we misprioritize. Like I think we probably have an opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, reconsider this RMM effort. I think it's huge. And because of your feedback you gave on this episode, I'm going to go to my product leaders today and talk about that. So that was dope. Chris, you want to do a giveaway with for anybody who actually stayed the
Sure.
10 minutes over?
Sure. Yeah, let's do it. Let's pick some. I'm just gonna go through chat here and pick somebody who I
Are you
feel like
looking
has
for
been.
I'm so bad. I was almost nervous. Is it, I have, friends that are Israeli that it's more like Yir instead of I imagine is that Yair? Yair? School me on it's the Fonseca. They were lighting it up in chat all time. I haven't seen them before
Yep.
either in here.
No, yeah, me neither. I also just grabbed Ryan Sipes.
Have either of you guys,
Sipes.
gift before or anything like that? What we're talking about is can we send you free stuff if you're still hanging with
Yeah.
us?
Yeah, yeah. So just send an email to swag at hunters.com and we will get you guys hooked up.
Man, this is where I wish we could bring more folks on here. I feel bad. Is it Yair? Yira? I don't know. Here. Swag at huntress.com. Send us something. I just appreciate you like participating. I know others like Kevin was lighting it up in here too. Wasn't lost on me, but like this is something like you can imagine we've only got 40 hours in a week, right? This type of stuff is expensive for us, but it is awesome for us. It's some of the best feedback we get in the community. So just again, really, really appreciate it. You got anything else, Chris? If not, I think we
Nope, that's
kind of
it
hit
for
it.
me.
All
Yep.
right. So thank you for hanging with us, and we'll see you in about a month. For those of you who join us on the webinars, I'll be there too. So light me up in the chat if you see me.